Imagine opening your company's bank account and finding tens of billions of dollars sitting there, doing almost nothing productive. Now, multiply that across corporate Japan. Right now, Japanese corporations are sitting on roughly $1.8 trillion in cash, not invested, not paid out to shareholders, just parked in bank accounts and short-term securities, earning surprisingly little.
To put that massive number in perspective, that's more than 5 times the size of Warren Buffett's own record-breaking cash pile, the $334 billion stash that made headlines globally, simply because even Buffett said the market was too expensive for him to touch. But here's the part almost nobody explains properly. Buffett looked at Japan's wasted cash, and instead of mocking it the way most Western analysts did for 35 years, he bought straight into it, quietly at first, then aggressively, and walked away with billions in gains. So which is it? Is sitting on a mountain of cash a catastrophic failure of management? Or is it, in certain hands, one of the smartest economic trades nobody was pricing correctly? Stick with me, because the real story here isn't Japan is weird about money. That's the lazy version. The real story is a lot stranger, and it starts with a stock market crash most people only vaguely remember. December 29, 1989. The Nikkei 225 closes at an all-time high, just under 39,000 points. Japan at that moment feels unstoppable. Tokyo real estate is worth more on paper than the entire state of California. Companies are buying up golf courses and Van Gogh paintings like it's pocket change. Then, it all comes apart, fast. What follows isn't just a bad year, it's the lost decades, a brutal stretch of deflation and stagnation. And here's the detail that actually matters for this story. The executives who lived through that crash never really stopped being scared of it. That fear got engineered directly into how Japanese companies operate, 2 ways specifically.
First, cross-shareholding, sometimes called Mochiai. Companies started buying stakes in each other. Imagine 5 friends, each owning a percentage of everyone else's house. None of them can easily kick another out, and no stranger can ever buy the whole neighborhood. That is essentially how corporate Japan protected itself. Your bank owns a piece of you own a piece of your supplier owns a piece of an insurance company. The whole web exists so nobody can ever face a hostile takeover. It generates basically 0 economic return. But that wasn't a bug. That was the entire point. Second, cash. Mountains of it. Because after 1990, a Japanese CEO's job wasn't grow the company. It was never, ever let the company go under again. Cash was armor. Think about what that mindset does to a generation of executives. Every investment starts to feel like a gamble. Every recession feels like 1990 all over again. And if your career depends on never repeating history, suddenly sitting on cash doesn't look irrational anymore. But by the early 2020s, this extreme caution led to something bizarre. More than half the companies on the Tokyo Stock Exchange's prime market were trading below their own book value. If you don't have a finance background, think of it like this. Imagine finding a heavy metal safe that contains exactly $100 inside, but the market is letting you buy the entire safe for only $80. That's a market openly telling you something is broken. And this is where most explainer videos completely miss the interesting part. They stop at Japan hoards cash, isn't that weird? But that cash pile was never just dead weight. It was underpriced optionality, and Warren Buffett was one of the only people who saw it. He started quietly buying into Japan's 5 biggest trading houses, the
the Sogo Shosha, massive conglomerates that control everything from global energy to instant noodles. He didn't even announce it publicly until his 90th birthday. Classic Buffett. Move first, talk later. But here is the genius part. Buffett wasn't just buying cheap companies. He found a way to make the financing almost free. He financed a huge chunk of these purchases by borrowing in yen-denominated bonds at roughly 1% interest. Then he used that exact same money to buy stakes in these companies that were paying dividends of around 4%. Because he borrowed in yen to buy in yen, there was no exchange rate risk. The spread between his borrowing cost and the dividends created an unusually attractive setup before even considering any gains in the stock itself. 35 years of Western fund managers calling Japan a value trap. One guy from Nebraska treats it like the most obvious trade in the world, generating massive, multi-billion-dollar returns. But the story doesn't end there. By the early 2020s, even Tokyo's regulators had concluded the old model needed to evolve. In 2023, the Tokyo Stock Exchange did something unprecedented. It formally requested that listed companies with an embarrassing price-to-book ratio and low cost of capital awareness publish a public plan explaining how they were going to fix it. The message was clear. Stop treating your balance sheet like a bomb shelter. And it worked. Share buybacks hit record highs. Mega corporations finally started unwinding those old defensive cross-shareholdings. But here's the detail nobody puts in these videos. A lot of the pressure forcing this change isn't just coming from Wall Street or Buffett. It's coming from inside Japan. There's a domestic activist investor named Yoshiaki Murakami who spent the early 2000s doing exactly this, buying into cash-rich Japanese companies and loudly demanding they pay it out. In 2006, he was convicted of insider trading and his career took a massive hit. But recently, he's been back, running multiple activist campaigns, making his fund one of the busiest on the planet. It's an ironic twist. The corporate governance reforms he aggressively pushed for became mainstream years later, even though his legal trouble stemmed from insider trading charges, not from advocating shareholder reform itself.
If all of this still feels abstract, consider just one company, Toyota. As of its fiscal 2025 filings, Toyota alone was sitting on north of $50 billion in cash and equivalents. One single car company, holding more liquid cash than most national governments keep on hand. What happens next is genuinely an open question. Either Japan Inc. keeps unwinding 35 years of defensive habits, and that $1.8 trillion slowly gets unleashed into the global economy, or the old instinct wins out. Maybe that mountain of cash was never the story. Maybe the real story was the fear that created it. 35 years later, Japan is finally learning that surviving the last crisis isn't always the same as preparing for the next one.
And that might turn out to be the biggest investment of all.